Hi everyone, my name is Vera Loa and I'm one of the current executive members of the Earl Haig Chess Club. Before I leave for next year, I just wanted to talk about one of my favorite chess openings, the fried liver attack. I hope this is useful for you.
Let's jump into the fried liver attack. It starts with the moves e4, e5, then knight to f3, and their knight goes to c6. This is very common and occurs in many games, and after that your bishop moves to c4 and you are playing the Italian game. This is actually one of my favorites because you have a lot of options to do from here. But if you want to move to the fried liver attack, your opponent must respond with knight to f6. This is the Italian game with two knights defense. If your opponent does not do this, then you cannot play the fried liver attack because there will be complications in the future. You just don't want to do it. Okay, but they do play knight f6, so now it's your turn and you play knight to g5. So you are actually threatening a fork on your next move, and if they don't see that, they might do something really dumb. Okay, you go ahead with the fork, you take the pawn, and you are forking the queen and the rook. Okay, so your queen has no choice but to move, you take the rook, and major point advantage, you are well on your way to winning the game. But this is obviously a best case scenario, and it doesn't really happen all the time. So what they usually do, they're going to move their pawn to d5. So from here, I think it's pretty obvious that you just take, then black takes, and you think, well, I can't fork anymore because my bishop is blocked from being able to defend that knight. And you think, okay, well, what do? Do I just go back? Because the black queen is attacking the knight right now, so it has to move somewhere. But guess what? You are going to fork anyway. So you might be thinking, this looks really dumb. You're taking one pawn and you're going to lose a knight. So anyone who knows simple math understands that this is down 2 points. But the thing is, the only piece that can take that white knight is the king. The king has to leave its place of protection to be able to take the knight, and it really has no choice but to take the knight because otherwise it would be a fork and there would be a point advantage. So the king takes, of course, and now it's wide out in the open, and what we're going to do is we're going to check. So as you can see, this check is a pretty powerful move because it forks the knight and the king at the same time. So if your king does something really dumb, like moving back into a corner, then it's pretty much checkmate. You take the knight with your bishop, and it's check. So the best move that black can do right now is take the bishop with the queen, and you're just going to take the queen with your queen, and it's still check, and the only move that black can play right now is bishop. You take, checkmate, game over, you win, congratulations. But that doesn't always happen. In fact, it almost never happens, so let's go back. The most likely scenario is king to e6 to protect the pinned knight. Now, what you're going to do is start adding more pressure to that knight because it can't move, otherwise it would be check. So, bring your knight to c3, attacking d5. Black has to somehow protect its knight, or they're practically over. One of the most common moves for black to play is moving the unpinned knight to b4. This does two things. First, it protects the d5 square, so we can't take that knight just yet. And it also threatens a fork. The knight is prepared to go to c2, checking your king and then taking your rook. If you want to prevent this, you do have a few options. One is to move your bishop back to b3, which protects c2 while keeping one knight pinned. Another option is just to move your king out of the way by castling, because then there's no check and black loses that advantage. The knight cannot risk taking the pawn on c2 anymore, because otherwise the pinned knight would be left undefended for the taking. Black will probably play pawn to c6 to protect the pinned knight. Now what we are going to do is make the king even more vulnerable. Right now there is a pawn in front of the opponent king, so we are going to attack it by playing pawn to d4. If black takes, that is a big mistake for them because the king is wide out in the open and you can do a lot of things from here, such as checking with the rook. If we open stockfish, we can clearly see that white has a clear advantage even though it is lower in points. So as long as we don't make too many mistakes from here, we can easily checkmate and win the game. So let's look at another variation that black might do. Instead of knight to b4 like we saw earlier, knight can actually go backwards to e7 to protect the pinned knight. This isn't a bad situation for white actually. So let's take a look. You can move pawn to d4, which forces the black pawn to take and expose the king. And now you can just castle and later on just check the king, and the king will be completely defenseless. Here's another thing you can do. With the king wide out in the open like this, you can do a great many things from here. So if you don't want to lose your knight, all you have to do is just take their knight, and they will take, and then you can just check from there and try to get the king into an even more vulnerable position. Or you can play some tricky moves, like bringing your bishop out into the game. So then they'll probably just take your knight, but now you can castle, and when you castle, your rook is into the game. What I find very interesting about the fried liver attack is that even though white is down on points, they're still in a preferable position compared to black because of how open the king is. So let's look at another move which black might do before we actually get to the fried liver. After you move to take the pawn on d5, black might not even try to take the white pawn with the knight. Instead, it could move the other knight to a5. This is a lot more common in more advanced players who have seen the fried liver attack before. And what this does is it threatens the bishop. And because your pawn is currently blocking the way, the bishop can't defend if your knight wants to fork. So that's not an option. Your bishop has to move somewhere. The recommended move is just to do a check, and they'll probably defend with their pawn, and you take, they take, and you might be able to set up some traps over here, like moving your queen out, so if the pawn does take your bishop, you are free to take a rook, which is definitely an advantage. If you're going to play the fried liver attack, there's also one more move that you really have to watch out for. After you play knight to g5, black might actually pull their bishop out and do bishop to c5. This is called a Traxler variation, and you might think, hey, let's just fork anyway. But now the bishop is going to play this really interesting move and check. Now you might be thinking, what is this move? I'll just take the bishop and win myself 2 points. But no, because now you're in that position, black can check you again with the knight, and if you don't play this properly, you're going to be in a very interesting position. Let's say you move back. Now, the queen is going to come into the game with a check, and you can't defend this. If you try pawn to g3, this is a horrible mistake, they'll just take, and if you do take, queen will just take your rook, it'll be check, and from here, you've pretty much lost the game. If you want to avoid all of this, then you're going to have to go back and do something different. So, instead of taking that pawn with the knight, you're going to take it with the bishop. This will be check, and black will be forced to move the king. And now you just move your bishop back to a position of safety on b3. From here, you're in a great position because black can't castle, you're still threatening a fork, and overall, your position is just better.
The fried liver attack is an overall amazing chess opening for those who love risky maneuvers and have an aggressive style of playing chess. I personally love it because I'm always using the Italian game, and then I just have to watch and see if they do the 2 knights defense, and then I can move in for the attack. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.